Hey there, welcome back to Total Geek Live Baltimore Presents. I am Baltimore, and today I am here to talk to you about Phoenix Resurrection. That's right, the return of Jean Grey. So, this is a 5-issue miniseries that just wrapped up, and so it returned to the living Jean Grey, who has been dead since New X-Men 150, which was in 2004. So she's been dead for 18 years, real time. So this is a pretty important part of the X-Men mythos. Jean Grey is one of the original X-Men, and she's been quite integral to many, many storylines. One of which is, the creation of the Phoenix mythology back in, way back in X-Men 101, which was in 1976. So Jean Grey and the Phoenix have been intertwined for a long time. So back then, what happened was the X-Men were in outer space on a space station, and they were trying to get back to Earth, and they weren't sure they were going to be able to survive the radiation from re-entry. And the only one who could really fly the plane and get down there, or the space shuttle, would be Jean Grey, using her telekinesis and telepathy. So she puts all the X-Men in a sealed container that would prevent them from being exposed to it, and decides to pilot the ship herself. And so what happens in this moment is she's unable to. She's killed by the radiation. But with her dying breath, she reaches out, and the Phoenix answers and saves her life. And then there's that famous scene where she rises up from Jamaica Bay saying, "I am the Phoenix." Great issue. And then they go along for the next 4 years or so until X-Men 137, which is the death of Phoenix. And what we didn't know until later on, and this is kind of not super important for this video, but the Phoenix that was there, the Jean Grey that was between X-Men 101 and 137, was not the real Jean Grey. It was the manifestation of the Phoenix in Jean Grey's likeness, basically. Jean Grey, the real Jean Grey, was trapped in a cocoon in Jamaica Bay, healing herself. So the Phoenix had never experienced human emotions before, and Jean Grey was the perfect host for her. And she went a little crazy. She got manipulated by masterminds. She went crazy. She killed a solar system full of people. So the Shi'ar decided that she must die. And they ended up, putting her to trial against the X-Men, against the Imperial Guard, and Jean Grey realized that she couldn't, every second, every day, contain the Phoenix Force. What if it happened again? What if she rose up again? So she decided to kill herself. And so it was a really, really heartbreaking scene, because up to that point, death, lasting death, wasn't really a thing. And there's a lot of stories about the original storyline ending for it and being changed and so forth, but that's not what I'm going to get into. But I'm going to say that it was impactful the way that it did end. However, a short 6 years later, Jean Grey, the real Jean Grey, returned to life. The Avengers and Fantastic Four found her buried in the cocoon in Jamaica Bay, restored her to life, and she formed up with the original X-Men to form X-Factor. And at this point, Scott Cyclops was married to Madeline Pryor, who ends up being a clone of Jean Grey. So there's a lot of baggage going on there. But this Jean Grey had never never joined with the Phoenix, never had that kind of life. Although later on she does get all the memories and restored into herself about this, so she knows all about it. That goes on for a long time. They're a long-standing member. They end up getting married, the two of them, and later on, when Grant Morrison takes over the X-Men, she is killed by Magneto, who's being pretending to be Zorn, or is he? There's still a little speculation there that is it really Magneto or not. Anyway, the Zorn character gives Jean Grey who was Phoenix at this point, who had merged and joined and become part of the Phoenix again, gave her an interplanetary stroke and killed her, and Jean Grey was dead. And it was, again, heartbreaking. 2004 this was. So she's been dead now 18 years, almost 18 years. Um, and, it's the longest time she's been dead, with a character who's been so intrinsically tied to resurrection and rebirth. It's a long time for her to stay gone and off the table. So this series uh, intended to bring Jean Grey back from the dead. And it certainly did. Jean Grey is back. And maybe not in the way that everyone expected, maybe not in the way that everyone wanted, but for all intents and purposes, Jean Grey is back. And she'll be starting a new X-Men team called X-Men Red. So that's going to be an interesting read to kind of see how that moves along and moves her story forward. Because Jean Grey at this point hasn't been a member of the X-Men, hasn't been a real part of the X-Men for almost 2 decades. And in between that time, and a little bit before, the Phoenix, who is a force of life and death, it's a rebirth, it's a cosmic entity, had bonded with several other people. The one that is most prominent is Rachel Grey, or Rachel Summers, who is the future time-displaced child of Jean and Cyclops. My favorite Phoenix is Rachel. She's the one who's held the Phoenix Force far longer than any other character without incident. So when there are stories of the Phoenix that don't involve Rachel and really sideline her, it's really sad and upsetting, because she can really take care of this like no one else. And I thought it was a great, her actual introduction into the X-Men was really, really great when she accepted the Phoenix Force and decided, I'm not going to be like my mother. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to go, all out like that. She takes the Phoenix Force and basically saddles it, basically tames it, is able to use it far greater and far better than Jean Grey ever did. So there are other Phoenix hosts that come in between now. You have the Stepford Cuckoos, the 3 of them during the Phoenix Song series. You have the Phoenix Five, which is Cyclops, Colossus, Magic, Namor, and Emma Frost. You have Quentin Quire, who becomes a Phoenix host. You have Corvus, who is a Shi'ar member of the Shi'ar Empire some way, who's back generations held the Phoenix Force as well, and he holds a fragment of the Phoenix Force in his sword. And then you have Thane, who is the son of Thanos, also wielding the Phoenix Force. And part of me, and there's even some other people who have it ancillarily. Spider-Man, he pretended to have the Phoenix Force for a while. It was called Spider Phoenix, kind of funny, but it wasn't a real thing. It was an illusion. But the more Phoenix gets these tales told about her and different hosts, it muddies the water. It lessens the impact of Jean Grey, and it's very unfortunate, and it's very frustrating. So on top of all that, you have her off the table for almost 2 decades. You have the Phoenix Force coming back saying that they are going to try to restart the mutant race, and this is Hope Summers, the child that's raised by Cable in the future, who comes back, who also takes on the Phoenix Force, and then wills it away. And of course, the Phoenix Force can't stay gone for very long, and she comes back again, and this time, the time-displaced original 5, Jean Grey, refuses the Phoenix Force again, and there's this whole storyline that takes place in her series, Jean Grey, which wrapped up as well very quickly, and I liked it actually a lot more than I expected to. The series was a lot better than I was expecting it to, so that was a nice bonus. Still didn't really like the time display So 5 to begin with, or their continued presence. But So all that kind of wraps around and kind of gives us back to what is happening in this series. So we have 5 issues by Matthew Roseberg, with art by Lionel Francis Yu. There's Carlos Pacheco and a few other artists who also work on the project as well. These 5 issues were taking place basically weekly from the end of December to the end of January, and it set the stage for the return of Jean Grey. And like the title suggests, Phoenix Resurrection, the return of Jean Grey, that is exactly what it is. Marvel didn't sugarcoat it, didn't tease us. It was literally the return of Jean Grey. And what I mean by that is Phoenix and Jean Grey have broken up. They're no longer together. And it sort of felt like, towards the end that the Phoenix was like a jilted ex-lover and was like saying, "I'll do anything, anything, anything to get you back, to keep you, have you to stay with me." And Jean was adamant about staying away and saying no and no and no. And that's kind of an interesting take, and it was one that upon several readings I tended to enjoy a little bit better. Um, Jean Grey is so tied into Phoenix, and when her first original return back in '86, she rejected everything Phoenix as well, um, and returned her baseline powers as well. Now she just has telepathy and telekinesis, and so I think that it was a smart thing to kind of remove Phoenix from the board again. Although I think Phoenix should come back and get Rachel. Come on, she's the best host, and go on forward. But I think for Jean Grey's sake, I think she really did need to be done with the Phoenix. I think there needed to be a time where she was like done and over with. Um, and so the interesting thing about this series is it starts off with a very big mystery. The last time we really saw Jean, she was in the White Hot Room, which is where all Phoenix hosts ascend to, and she became the White Phoenix of the Crown, which is kind of like the cream of the crop for Phoenix hosts. And so this kind of series, I believe, kind of takes place in the White Hot Room and in the real world. Phoenix hurtling back, trying to find a suitable host, Jean Grey, and doing everything she can to get her to join and to emerge again as Phoenix. So in the White Hot Room, Jean Grey is kind of oblivious to everything that's going on, and it's filled with all dead X-Men. All the X-Men who've been killed over the years are there. And it's kind of really cool to see them there, even if they're never going to come back again. Um, and the mystery spills over to, the real universe, Marvel Universe, and the X-Men. This is like an all hands on deck situation, which is kind of cool to see all the X-Men coming together and then splitting up, Kitty Pryde taking the lead and kind of figuring out, all right, so what's going on? And it's kind of neat that all the locations that they send a team to are places where the Phoenix had, or Jean Grey had, an important breakthrough or moment or scene or something like that. There's parts in France, there's in Alaska, there's in Arizona, which is super important. And not just because Phoenix is in Arizona, but because the butte that she and Cyclops make love on, well, not really her, but right before she dies in the Dark Phoenix saga, that's where the White Hot Room is sort of being manifested on Earth. And so all the X-Men go over there, and they end up crossing over into the White Hot Room and basically confronting Phoenix and Jean and deciding, how they're going to combat and bring her back and figure out what's going on. And this is the part where I'm talking about with Phoenix and Jean Grey and this kind of ex-lover situation. Phoenix is doing, I'll bring back anybody. Anybody you want to bring back. Your family who was killed by the Shi'ar. Your husband, Scott, I'll bring them all back. Just merge with me. And it's kind of like a powerful thing because when you think about the emotional wise, what would you give up to see your family back? To your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your family. That kind of steeled determination that it takes to say, no, this isn't right. I mourn them, and they lived and they died, and I will remember them. But I'm not going to give you my essence again, my life, to bring them back. So it's quite impactful. And one thing that was nice is Cyclops, her husband, had died a little while ago, and the last ditch effort of the Phoenix was to bring him back. And Jean Grey says, "Thank you for doing that. You gave me a chance to say goodbye to my husband on my terms." And it was a really beautiful moment with the two of them, reminiscent of the very first, not very first, but the time they were in Arizona, and she takes off his mask and holds back his optic blast with her telekinesis so she can see his eyes. It was a beautiful moment, and then he died again in her arms. And it was really, really beautiful. The artwork is incredible. It's a little rushed at some points, and then maybe not as detailed in others, but it was really good. I enjoyed it. I thought Matthew Rosenberg did a really great job. And I think it's going to be interesting to see where Jean Grey goes from here. You know, no longer shackled to the Phoenix, no longer having that kind of heavy baggage to saddle her with. I'm interested to see where she goes, and definitely will be getting bored on X-Men Red to see what happens. But it was definitely not the book that I was expecting, but it was the book I kind of needed for Jean Grey. But tell me what you think about Phoenix Resurrection. Are you excited Jean Grey's back? Are you like, keep her dead? Or what? Sound off in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe. And as always, it's all geek to us. And I'll see you soon.